afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you to our presentation today. My name is Gladys Ferrer-Berkowitz. I'm the Director of Student Engagement Programs, and we are today hosting a workshop on letters of recommendation. And I'm very, very happy to have a great panel to talk to you about how to get started with letters of recommendation. Okay, so introductions. I would like to first off recognize our faculty panelists who have taken time out of their busy schedules to be with us today. So I want to thank them so much for their time. I have Dr. Alejandra Dubkovsky, and she's a professor of history, as well as Dr. Len Mueller from the chemistry department, and Dr. Annika Spear from theater, film, and digital production. So thank you for joining us today. I am also being joined by Chancellor's Research Fellows, Beatrice from biochemistry. She's also a Chancellor's Research Fellow. Greg Sanchez from history. He's a Chancellor's Research Fellow. We have another student who may be joining us. She's running late, Hannah Happich from environmental sciences, and myself, who will be leading this conversation today. Okay, so why are letters of recommendation important? Letters of recommendation are going to be required for many opportunities that you will be applying for. And it's really important, and part of this conversation will be how do you earn these strong letters of recommendation? Because you want to make sure that you are developing relationships with faculty so that they can have the material to give you a really strong letter of recommendation that goes above and beyond talking about you being in a class and earning a great grade. You want to make sure that the people that you're working with get to know you and they're able to talk about your accomplishments, any challenges that you faced and how you've overcome them, and how all the potential that you have, the development that they've seen in your growth since the time that they met you. Letters of recommendation are also very critical in that they think of an application as a puzzle. You have your application, you have essays that you're submitting. Letters of recommendation are either going to attest to things that you're saying in your application, or they're going to bring in new information that you may not have room to say in your application. So they're very critical. And oftentimes, letters of recommendation may be the tipping point when decisions are being made about your application. What that person is saying, who that person is, and how well they know you is going to count a lot. So again, for you, you need to start developing these relationships sooner rather than later. Most applications will require one letter. The graduate schools are going to require 3 letters. There are award opportunities that ask for up to 5. There's one that asks for 8 letters of recommendation. So you need to start developing those relationships so that you can have those people that can attest to how wonderful you are. So again, today we have these fabulous panelists who are going to give you some insight from the faculty perspective of how you can earn these great letters of recommendation. Okay, so we're going to get started. Beatrice?
Yeah, thank you, Gladys. So I'll be starting off by asking our faculty panel the first question. How can students develop relationships with faculty?
I'm happy to address that. I mean, start by meeting your faculty, right? Like, speak up in class, go to office hours, drop in with a question. If you're in a hybrid course or a Zoom course, and you can, permitting, turn your camera on so that you are connecting, so that they know who you are. You want to be more than just a number. So first step is to meet them.
Okay. So just a follow-up question with that. So I know office hours tend to be like the most common way to meet faculty. So what is the best use of office hours?
That's really they're student hours in a way. They're for you all, right? So we're there working, checking our email on TikTok, doing whatever we're supposed to be doing in our office, but we're there to interact with you. And I think the tricky thing, especially at a public university, I'm a public university student, I'm a UC product, undergrad and grad, and there's a lot of you and there's only one of us. And that's really, that imbalance is really hard, because even for most of us that really want to get to know you, there's still only one of us. So it really does require you to take that deep breath and come talk to us. But most of us are just, you might see my kids running around. There's something behind me because my house is messy. Like we're just people. And you have to maybe say that line to yourself over and over again. This is my professor, which sounds really intimidating, but it's just another person. And the vast majority of us want to get to know you, because then when we're asked to do things like write letters, we can say more than, Beatrice took my class, I can see she did well. We don't want to write those. Those letters are horrible, right? So think of that as an opportunity to tell us about you, right? So I always tell my students that there's not necessarily one specific question you need to feel like you need to ask. If you have one, of course, about the reading, but think about it as your time to introduce your intellectual self to us, to me.
Thank you. Dr. Mueller, do you have anything to add to that?
It's just in total agreement with what's been said. I mean, it's a wonderful opportunity to just exchange ideas. Now, most of the ones that you'll exchange in my office hours have to do with chemistry and solving analytical problems, but it gives me a first introduction to you. What drives you intellectually? How do you approach problem solving? How do you approach difficult challenges? And to the extent that is reflected in the other work that you do, I can then comment on that in letters. And so it's a wonderful opportunity. It's okay to show up with problems and challenges. We like to see that. One of the best letters I wrote for a student once who was applying for med school had to do with her coming to my office hours after failing the first midterm and saying, look, I'm unhappy with this. What do I do? And so my challenge to her was a big one. I told her to work all of the even problems in the back of each chapter. And if she did that, I guarantee she would do better on the next exam and the final. And I've said that to other students in the past, but she actually took me up on it. She did it. She showed me her work. She came to office hours with lots of questions, and she got an A- in my class and went to med school. So it was a great opportunity for me to see just how dedicated she was and what she was willing to do to be successful in a challenging situation.
Okay, thank you all so much for your answers.
Great,
Okay,
thank you so much. I guess I'll take the baton. Yeah, so I just wanted to comment, on Dr. Mueller's, student who sort of found some humility in approaching the professor and saying, "Hey, listen, what have I done wrong?" But then taking the initiative to go and do the work that was asked of her to do. And I think that's an example of what it means to be a good student. So moving on to our next question, that is, how can students maintain relationships with faculty? So the stage is set. We've taken a class with a professor. We really enjoyed our time with them, but now the quarter is completed and we moved on. Perhaps a quarter or two or three or more quarters have gone by, and we just haven't had the opportunity for various reasons to continue on maybe taking classes with that professor that we generally connected with. How can we maintain that relationship? Any advice for what does that look like?
Yeah, I think that there's nothing weird about emailing after a little bit of time has passed. Like, I think there's this misperception that you need to be in touch. We don't need to be pen pals every week or something. A year can go by, or 2 years even, and a student can follow up. It's helpful if you give a reminder. I took your class in fall of 2020 and yada, yada, yada. But I love that. I teach public speaking, so I love when I get a follow-up email from a student 2 or even 3 years later saying, I just interviewed for a job or grad school, and I was reflecting on what I learned in your public speaking class for this interview. And then they give me an update. I'm now applying to be the cybersecurity manager of Carnegie Mellon's yada, yada. And it's so cool to hear from them and to know what they're up to. So I think there's nothing weird about, not every single professor is going to be your mentor, your lab manager, or whatever, but you can maintain relationships, across time with people, and dropping a follow-up email is a normal thing to do.
And we're definitely interested to see what you do next. And so I've had And granted, this is the minority of students, but I've had a number of students who keep, fairly regular contact. Will drop in once every quarter or two just to let me know how they're doing, especially students who I really connected with. And from those, mentoring relationships do develop. So, out of those, probably a dozen or so have gone on to much stronger mentoring relationships where we'll meet, once or twice a quarter and have coffee and discuss, what are you doing? What are your plans? What are you applying for? How is that going? What are you thinking about in terms of applications for grad schools and your future plans? What are the things that you like about it? What scares you about it? What excites you about it? What worries you about it? And it's just a chance to get advice from someone who's gone through that process before. So it's a nice relationship that sort of breaks down the barriers or the lionization of the faculty by the undergrads. That's unnecessary, and you should start to see as just as scientists or academics who've gone through a similar process, and it sort of helps demystify the faculty, hopefully, for the students.
I'll just say that we need to do that ourselves. We need to maintain our relationships. We need to ask for letters of recommendation too. And we have to send these emails like, hey, do you remember me? We were on this conference 2 years ago. So this is part of academia, and it's in and when I do think it's weird, but we have to do it too. And I think these relationships, it can be, again, it depends how you feel with that professor. And they're like, I love it. I always tell my students, especially when I teach freshmen, and a lot of our students, as you all know, are first gen, they don't have. So I said, if you ever do something good and you want to share with something and you feel like you can talk, just send me an email. And so sometimes I get students be like, I did really well in this midterm. And I know it's kind of funny, but that alleviates the tension of what you can have a conversation with. And we get happy about your successes. If they're directly related to something we taught you, fantastic. That makes our day. But even if it doesn't, even if it just shows growth, like I did this lab, it really inspired me, but I don't want to do this, but then I took this class in biology and that's going to excite us too, because in our letter, we can write about your trajectory. We can write about how you have evolved as a scholar. And that's what makes a really strong letter of recommendation, not just, I met this person a couple of times and I know they're really good, but the letter that's able to narrate you, right? To make you jump out of the page as an individual. And only that's about going back once in a while, but just feel free to let us know how you're doing. But it's not also weird to reach out after 2 years. That is both of those extremes, and everything in between is right.
I have to jump in here because one of my biggest joys is to get an email from a student that says, hey, I just did this. Or even sometimes when you say, I applied for something and I didn't get it, but I appreciate that you took the time to write for me, or what I learned from the process. I think that's something that you kind of learn, but we want you to know this up front because it'll make you stand out.
And don't ever feel bad if it's 5 years later and now you're applying for something else, to send us an email and say, hey, 8 years ago, I took your class as a freshman. And since then I've done, the following 2 or 3 things, but I've decided I'm going to dental school. And I was wondering, would you still be able to write a letter for me? And usually the answer is yes. And usually it's really fun to hear what you've done since then. So don't ever feel bad. Usually we're more than willing to dust off an old letter, make it better if we have new information, add to it, and send it in again. It's not weird. We do this all the time to our colleagues, as you heard.
Great. We'll go on to our next question.
Great. Thank you so much to all the professors for that. It's nice to hear that, to bring some humanness to the conversation and sort of demystify this, what's going on with letters of recommendation. So our next question is, what attributes do you look for when agreeing to write a strong letter of recommendation? So you receive requests quite often for letters of recommendation, but are there any characteristics from students that you observe that really kind of grab your attention so that you sit down and take, maybe a little bit of extra time with their letters of recommendation?
I was just gonna jump in and answer it in a different way and tell about one of my times asking for a letter of recommendation. I was an undergrad, and I asked a professor I had in a class I did well in for a letter of recommendation, and he didn't agree. And I was so taken aback and so intimidated. And I just thought, oh my gosh, why not? Like, what did I do wrong? And he just said, very honestly, there are other professors who know you a little better and are going to be able to write a much stronger letter than me. And I had not thought about it like that. I just thought he was very nice, right? And he was very approachable. And that's why I asked him. And he kind of pushed me to go talk to the other people. He said, I'll do it at the end of the day if this is what you need. He wasn't going to let me out to dry, but he really pushed me. And that, I have to say, at first I was like, oh, I can't believe he said no to me. But he wasn't saying no. He was sort of saying, you're going to want to look for someone that's going to portray you in the best possible light. So I don't know if I'm looking for something in particular. It's not about the grade you got in my class, but it's about my ability to speak about the qualities you have for the thing you're applying for, right? Like, and I've written med school applications, even though I'm a historian, I've written law schools, I've written everything in between. So it's not about a particular thing, but it's, do I know you enough? Have I demonstrated enough of a relationship that the letter I end up producing is not just so generic that it doesn't end up doing anything for you. It ends up just saying, you existed and you took my class. And if that's the only thing I can say about you, it's not to your interest that you get a letter from me, because it's not going to be the best letter. And I know that's really hard to hear, but this is built on the other two kind of questions.
Yeah, the types of letters we write certainly depend on the strength of our interactions. So for a student, sometimes a letter that just says, look, I had 300 students in my freshman chemistry class. This person was the absolute top person in my class that quarter. They sat in the front row. They asked lots of questions. They seemed really interested. Sometimes that's enough, right? For applying for something for a summer but usually it's not. And so to get the next level up, I need to know something about you beyond just seeing your CV. Seeing your CV helps. I need to know what your activities are, how those are in line with what it is that you say you want to do. But then hopefully something that I can attest to, something where I can make it more personal. And to have that, you need to come chat with us for a bit. Talk to us a little, we'll be able to put a little of that in. Talk to us a lot, we'll be able to put a lot of that in. Be willing to show yourself to us so that we can get to know you a bit more professionally. What drives you, what motivates you, what were the experiences that got you here, and we'll be able to say more. And it really is, as others have said, just attesting that the things that you say really are, true to our interactions with you. And just like your essays, our best letters aren't going to just tell them things, they'll hopefully show them things. And to do that, we need ammo. So help us out with that.
I think this kind of answers this question on the PowerPoint. And also, so I sort of want to address Gino's question in the chat, that what is the best way to reach out to a past professor whose class you really liked to get them to know them more for a letter of rec? What should you write in the email? And I think it's totally acceptable to reach out to a past professor and say, I really enjoyed your class in chemistry or history or theater and film. I'd love to come pick your brain. I'm thinking about applying to grad school. I'm looking at this internship. I'm curious about your path. I have questions about my own path. Like, I'd love to come in and talk to you. So it's honestly as simple as that. I know it's easy to say, don't overthink it. And if you're being asked for 8 letters of rec, which I'm gonna commiserate with you, seems excessive. It can be overwhelming because you shouldn't have to do this with every faculty member you've ever taken, but you should pick a few. Pick a few whose vibe you felt comfortable with, whose research really interests you, and do exactly what Gino's asking. Follow up with them just to learn more, just as a brain picking meeting kind of thing. That's a normal thing to do. And then it's not weird at all to follow up after that follow up and say, I loved our conversation. Now I'm applying I see that the Chancellor's Research Fellowship opportunity opened. I'm going to apply to be that. Would you be interested in working with me or whatever, right? That's how you build that rapport.
And
So answering,
just to add, I'm sorry.
I was just going to just say, and adding to a question in the chat, it's totally okay if this is via Zoom, right? And sometimes this interaction, 15 minutes via Zoom, may be enough. In fact, will give us significantly more information before we met. So it is helpful. It's great if it's longer and we get to have more conversation, but even a short conversation over Zoom can be really effective.
And I was going to say, make sure that you are developing these relationships and that you get a sense from the person when you're asking for the letter. If they tell you, I'm really overwhelmed, or I don't think I know you as well, take that as the challenge to either get to know them or to find somebody else to write the letter. I work with a lot of students who are applying for lots of opportunities. And I've encountered situations where students have said, I asked this person, they told me they were busy, but they'll do it. And the deadline comes and that letter doesn't arrive. And then that student is penalized for that. So you don't want to be put in that situation. So if somebody doesn't feel like really excited about writing you that letter, or tells you, I have so many things on my plate, I'm not sure if I'm going to get to it, it's better for you to say thank you and then move on and find somebody else. Don't rely on that person, because again, there's a lot of things that are on faculty's plates. Sometimes students are applying for opportunities at about the same time. So when people are applying for grad school, faculty are being bombarded by lots of students who are asking. So again, if they know you, they're going to go out of their way to do it. But if you just showed up and said, I took a class a year ago, can you write me a letter? You might be a little challenged. So again, this is why we want to make sure that you guys develop those relationships. Next question.
So how can students make the letter writing process easier?
Organize yourself in advance. So I honestly, at this point, I have a template in my Microsoft Word doc that I usually end up copy pasting, and my response to, hi, Dr. Spear, can I get a letter of rec? And it's like, what are you applying for? When is it due? To whom do I submit? Can you please include your application and essay and research materials? Can you remind me, if it's a large class that I teach, because I teach 150-person classes, what you delivered some of your speeches on, or email me a couple of your assignments. So if you don't have to put all of that in the body of your email, but I think it would help to say, I'm applying for this opportunity. It's due at this date. Somebody also asked, and I know this is probably a question you're going to ask, but how much advance notice? Different faculty might say different things. I appreciate 3 weeks. And to Gladys's point, especially if you're applying on a cycle where everybody is applying, it's one thing if it's like in a one-off odd thing over the summer, maybe a week's notice or 2 weeks notice is fine. But if I'm writing a bunch of letters of rec for med school, grad school, law school, like massive, collective due dates, it's helpful if a student puts in the email, it's for this, here's my stuff, here's where it's due, when it's due, here's who you submit to, or you'll receive an automated link, etc. And then that just minimizes our back and forth hassle a little bit too.
Yeah, I'll just echo that, right? Because the materials you're going to have to submit, your personal statement and the like, right? And sometimes you feel like they have to be perfect or they have to be done. I'd rather see a personal statement in progress 3 weeks before your letter is due than a perfect one the night before, because then my letter is going to be the weaker for it, right? So think of these things as you send to us, and you can say to us, this is a work in progress, but this is, any information you provide from us. Sometimes rather than, I'll say, can you give me your CV or any resume you have? But I also will add, is there something in that resume that you want me to highlight? Like, I'll ask you, is there an activity or something that you're really proud of that you couldn't fit into your personal statement that would make sense for me to mention? And that actually, that makes my letter stronger, but it makes you look better. So I think of these as relationships, right? You're asking us to do something. We're willing to do it. It's part of our job to do it. We like to do it, but we want to do it well, and we want to make you look good. So as much as you can help us make you look good, that's what we're trying to do, right? So I know with professors and everyone, but they're not adversarial relationships. We're like trying to be there one-on-one. So as much as you can give us to make you look good, that's what we're trying to do. So, sometimes people will ask for like a paragraph or something like that, but rather than that, I know that can be burdensome, but it's as much as you can give us, the better. So if you have that ready to go when you ask us for the letter, even if you don't attach it to the original email, if we're going to send you, can you give me more info, and you can just put it all, then we're more likely to be on board.
One of the things that they hope we can do when we write letters is get a sense from your application, your essays, about important aspects that maybe you overlooked because you're not directing a program or a graduate advisor. So for instance, one of the letters I was writing for a student, she had been involved in an activity where she had written a grant to get funding to support an outreach program, and it didn't get funded. And the next year, the person who took over as president decided to apply for this program again. And this student, gave her all of her application materials for it, told her where she thinks she went wrong, and helped her prepare it. So she didn't get and it was funded. So she didn't get credit for getting the grant that got funded, but she did something much more important from a professional standpoint, which was she supported someone else and let them succeed. And that's hugely important in many enterprises and in graduate school. So I could highlight that in a way that, I don't think she recognized the significance of, and that can be really useful in an application.
Other advice that I give students is when you're asking for a letter of recommendation, certainly provide your resume, provide a copy of your transcript, provide a link to whatever it is you're applying for so that the professor understands how you're fitting whatever it is you're applying for. But more importantly, don't be shy about giving 3 or 4 bullet points to say, can you talk about this? Or remember that I did this when I was in your class, or that I accomplished this. Because again, you're helping them to write that letter. So the easier you make their job, the better that letter is going to be. So thank you, everyone. I think we sort of addressed this, but you want to go ahead and ask it?
Yeah, so when it comes to time, we're all curious. So, we've already been kind of, instructed that perhaps 3 weeks is adequate amount of time to give your letter writer. But in addition to that, if perhaps a student is interested in applying to multiple grad schools, let's say, for instance, they have interest in a PhD in history, but also has interest in a law school, is that okay? And then how many letters is too many letters to ask of one professor? And a follow-up to that would be, when should a student follow up with that professor? Hey, just wanted to know where my letter is, if you've completed that yet. Thank you.
Ask for a lot of letters, because once I write it, I want to send out as many as I can, because sending them out to additional institutions is very quick. Regarding follow-up, I am not insulted, and usually I ask the students to remind me, hey, we're a week away. And then I tell them that if I don't respond, 3 days later, they're to send me another email that says, hey, just letting you know, we're 4 days away, at which point they should start emailing me daily, not because I don't want to do it, but because I realize how chaotic my schedule can get at times, and I would hate to miss it. And I promise not to miss it. I will stay up really late if necessary to make sure it gets out. Usually I have them done before that, so it's not a last minute effort, but sometimes there's just like one aspect to finish up to actually get it out the door. So definitely follow up. It's best to give me 4 weeks to begin with, because I have to start working into my schedule when I'm going to write it. And it sounds silly that, something that, why do I need 4 weeks to get that in? There's so much other writing that I'm doing, is I just need to set aside some time where my brain can switch to the style of writing that I need to do for that letter. So I can take the time to do it. And often that'll be a Sunday morning that I'll do that, but it has to get on my Sunday morning writing schedule.
Yeah, I don't mind a follow-up at all. I appreciate it. I also I have a policy where I follow up with the student. So usually when I agree to it, I kind of give them a heads up, like, this is going to go on my to-do list for next week or 2 weekends from now or whatever. And then I always send an email after I've submitted it, and I let them know, because I think it gives them peace of mind to not sit around wondering, like, did she do it? Did she do it? Will I know if she did it? Should I have sent another email? Should I not? Like, I know that is stressful. So you follow up with us and I will follow up with you. That's my policy policy. So if you haven't heard from me, then maybe it did slip through the cracks, which is rare, but I'm a person and it happens, right? So don't be shy about it. But I always send students an email saying, hey, just a heads up, your letter is in, good luck, keep me posted kind of thing. Just a short info email to tell them it's out.
And to pick up on the sort of last part, Greg, of your question about how many different letters, and I think I see Eliana's question, if you could ask a professor to submit the same letter to multiple programs. So this is usually it's okay, and usually once we have a letter for you, it's easy to tweak. Sometimes it is a red flag to me when the student's like, I'm applying to pharmacy, to optometry, to law school, to grad school, and then I have a conversation about why, why this many, that is sort of like when I get asked by one student for 12 letters to 12 radically different programs, that just probably means the student's not too sure what to do. They're feeling a lot of pressure, especially right now that, the programs are getting smaller, it's getting tighter, and all that is understood. But that far of a wide interest and that probably ends up with 12 rejections as opposed to, a greater chance of that. So often when I get a request, it's like that diverse, I have a conversation about it, but it's quite easy to tweak letters for programs that are related, like grad school and law school. I'll add a couple sentences here and there. What I would say is if there is a particular program that you're going to be applying to many grad schools or to many jobs, but there's one in particular that this one's it, like this is your dream, to articulate that to us, right? Because then, maybe I'll send, the standard letter to all the programs, but to that one that really means, that can, maybe add a little extra, think through it. So that's what I would say to communicate. But yeah, a lot of times we're asked to submit to a general standard database, and you then will have control of sort of a standard letter of recommendation. That tends to work. I would just say it's obviously better if it's personalized for the program. But yes, you can have a sort of standard letter that goes out for different programs. The more specific it can be, obviously, the better. But if you have 3 letters of recommendation and you're asking now your 3rd professor, and this is kind of like that letter that's just padding the other 2, a generic letter is more than fine, I would say.
Okay. And I will carry on with the last question. So I think we went over a lot of great information and great advice, but I'm also sure that there are some students here who may be feeling overwhelmed with all this new information. So what advice do you have to ease students' nerves in approaching faculty for a letter of rec?
Just remember that faculty and students are not that different. We were students previously. We see you as the future academics, right? Or the future leaders. And so we see you as part of the continuum of academic training. And that's a really, the place where you are is a really important spot. So we are happy to talk with you. We are happy to mentor you. Now, we're extremely busy, so, let's make this worth everyone's time, right? So come with good questions, come prepared to, to engage in a conversation and a discourse, in the setting of whatever academic discipline we're in, right? But just realize, we're just normal people. We're your parents' age. And so we're not going to be best friends, but we share an interest, hopefully, in what, in terms of our passion for this field. And so it's a great conversation for us to have. We want to spend the time for that. And if we have the sense that you're really dedicated and really interested in this, we will give you a lot of time and a lot of attention. And that's spectacular from our standpoint. So yeah, don't be nervous about that. Realize that you may catch us though at some bad moments, right? We've got a lot of deadlines. We've got a lot of pressure, just like you do. And we understand, we could catch you at bad times too. So sometimes you have to stick your head in the door directly to grab our attention. And that's a wonderful thing to do. And we'll ask you to come back another time. But if we set aside time, then, know that we're really interested in talking with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think Glenn already said it, but just we're people, we've just been around the sun a few more times, right? But we get it. We know we're in the same boat where I'm not in my office, like with a red pen cackling. Like, that's not why I got into this, right? I very much want you to succeed and do well. It brings me joy. I just saw that somebody, Rogelio, said in the chat, I know it's bad, but is there any advice for a person who hasn't really gone to office hours, but they're applying? Yeah, it's okay. We're not judging that either. I mean, we know what it's like to be busy. We know what it's like to work multiple jobs as a student or whatever too. So I think it's okay, students, if you didn't get to office hours and now you're in this boat, right? Again, try to plan ahead enough out of the 4-week mark so that you can attend a Zoom office hour. You want to be able to send an email that says, I took your class this quarter, I excelled on this project, or I did my speech on this. I'm now applying for something. I'd love to meet with you. Is there a 15-minute window that I can come chat with you? Because even that will humanize you for a second and get you on our radar. So don't wait till the absolute deadline, but it's a reality that you're not going to make it to all of the office hours of all your professors. Yeah, don't stress. Don't let that be. I think we have enough anxiety and gatekeeping of ourselves. Like, don't create more for yourself. Just remind yourself, it's a person. I have an ask. I'm going to go for it, right? And the worst case scenario, you hear no or nothing at all. That's the worst. But realistically, that's not what's going to happen. So I think it's better to ask and try, now, never too late, right? So don't stress yourself out too much. I have one thing that I want to flag up that didn't get asked, but that I think is important, that I've been asked elsewhere. And I'd love to hear what the other faculty say about this, which is waiving the right to see the letter. So you know how when you submit a letter, it asks you, do you waive the right? And I think that this can be a source of stress for people, because on the one hand, waiving the right means you're never going to see what was said about you, which is stressful. But on the other hand, if you're asking people who you don't trust to advocate for you and you don't waive the rights, there is potential that that can be seen as watering down your letter or sort of devaluing your letter. So this is sort of the two talking points of this issue that other students in the past have addressed stress to me about. And I want to ask my colleagues on the panel to address it.
I'll just say one final thing about this. As someone with a child with really high anxiety, we always walk through like, what is the worst case scenario? So like, that's what I tell them. Like, what is the worst thing that you think is going to happen if you send your professor an email? Like, they won't reply. That's not a terrible thing. So just, that's something to get over the nerves. The vast majority of places that I send letters to require confidential letters, right? I will not agree to write a letter if it's going to be a bad one. Like, if for some reason I didn't have a good experience and for some reason you still think I will make a good letter writer and I don't, I will say I'm not the best person to write a letter. Right, the majority of professors who will say will tell you that, right? You're not. So I prefer to write confidential letters because I think they're read as stronger. So I think it's to the best of your best advantage to see that. If after, I mean, I'm saying nice things, right? But I think it increases your chances. I've never had a student ask me to see a letter later or ask to waive their confidentiality. So I've never had that happen because I think the confidential letters are read as so much stronger.
I think it happens in the system. Like if in law school apps or med school apps, they have a box that they check, like I do or don't waive. They've never asked me directly when I'm writing, but they've asked me about it peripherally after the fact. Like, should I have waived my rights when I, upload my stuff to the law school thing or the med school thing? So
I would say yes. I would waive rights. I've actually never read any of my letters of recommendations written about, because I think that it's stronger if, because it implies a trust, right? That the person can speak freely about you. Those are my 2 cents.
I wouldn't write a letter for an undergraduate that I didn't think that I could say positive things about. There are situations where I do have to write letters that are trickier because they might be for a grad student and I'm sort of tied in a way that I have to give a recommendation and maybe I don't actually think they're my best grad student ever, right? Those are much trickier and I have to navigate those carefully, but that's not the situation I'll be in with any undergraduate because I could just come up with an excuse if I didn't think I could write a good one. So if you ask me and I agree, you can take that as an indication that I'm going to write the most positive letter I can within the information that I have. You're on
Great,
mute.
thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, for those fine answers. I guess here is a segment of our workshop where we want to discuss some final tips that the professors might be willing to share any burning desires, to share any final thoughts. But from a student's perspective, one thing that I think it's worthy of mentioning is, when professors say come to our office meetings prepared with something to say, or good questions that are formulated. This is important. It may just take 5 or 10 minutes, but it's important once you reach their office, whether that's Zoom or in person. Another way that you maybe want to find talking points or speaking points is to get involved with campus organizations, clubs, and that way you have something to talk about that's school related, to sort of build a rapport. Professors might want to know what kind of activism that you're into and the like. And I think also it's very important to mention that once the letters of recommendation have been written and you've submitted your application packages to whichever grad school you're wanting to attend, follow up with your professors, tell them thank you, and then let them know exactly, let them know, the outcome of your applications. They want to hear, all the good news, and even if the news isn't great, they also want to hear about that as well. But at this moment, I'd just like to kind of, thank the professors for attending this workshop, and also ask, perhaps if there's anything else that might come to your mind, to please share with us.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate the final point you made about saying thank you, and with a quick anecdote. So I've been the faculty member on a couple different scholarship committees, and there were 3 separate instances where we ended up where we weren't able to do, like COVID was one year, for example, where we weren't able to conduct interviews that year, and we still had to get rid of the money or we were going to lose it. And the decision we made was based on, we gave it to a person from the previous year, the one person who had written a thank you letter. Same thing in our department. We ended up with a pot of money that it got donated. We had X number of days to get it out. We didn't have time to do an application pool, and we collectively agreed to give it to the person who had written the thank you letter last time. So it is no small, it costs you very little, and you have no idea what a improvement of your ethos it is, your authority and your credibility, to take 30 seconds and show gratitude. Because I have 3 times seen us actually end up giving students money just because they had said thank you. So, somebody says, can we send gifts? You definitely don't need to and shouldn't. Like, no. We don't expect that. If you're a grad student finishing your PhD, it's common to buy a thank you gift for your advisor. We do not expect undergrads or want undergrads to give us gifts, but you can write a handwritten card. That's like a lovely step to slide under the professor's office or something. But minimum, write an email. Write an email that says thank you.
And we save those. I don't know. I save those. If I'm having a bad day, I'll look at those. They make me happy. So they mean a lot to us. And in terms of talking points, I was just laughing at what Len wrote about sort of saying, beginning your conversation with, I love chemistry. I'm going to, right? We love what we do, right? So an easy talking point is, I like what you do. Can you tell me more? We will, until you tell us to be quiet. We love what we do, right? So this is, sometimes I feel like there's a lot of intimidation. Like, I need to know something about your topic. I need to know the latest. You don't need to know the latest debates that are tearing up that early America to come talk to me. You just need to say, hey, what is early America? It sounds interesting. Oh my goodness. I'll have so just a general interest in our area. Is it good enough sort of motivating conversation? Because from there, actually, you might find you have an interest that we can help direct in some way. We have sort of wealth of knowledge and resources at our disposal that sometimes we don't know where to put them and who they can apply for. So we need the students to come to us and say, hey, I have an interest in this, because we're like, actually, yeah, we have a way to connect you to that.
I wanted to mention, there's a couple of students that have asked in the chat about who should write letters of recommendation? Should it always be faculty, or could they ask an advisor to write a letter? Couple points. When I advise students, I always say, give me a list of who you're going to ask for letters of recommendation. Tell me what you think they're going to say about you. Perhaps you're doing research with one faculty member. That's great. That's a perspective that they're going to bring to the letter. You should ask somebody who's seen you in the classroom and can talk about your academic strengths. And then, depending on what that award, what you're applying for, if it's grad school, I recommend all 3 people should be faculty members. But if you're applying for an award opportunity, maybe the award looks for people who have leadership skills. That's when an advisor might be appropriate, whoever oversees the organization that you ran and can really attest to the leadership that you've demonstrated and so forth firsthand. Then yes, an advisor would be appropriate. So really think strategically. And I think that writing down who's going to write for you and what they can say will help you to think about who knows you really well. And also, like I said earlier, if you're giving them ideas of what they can write about, doing that exercise will help you get that prepared. And I'm sorry, Len, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say under the final tips, just keep in mind that all the faculty are here because other faculty 20 years ago took an interest in us. They mentored us, they wrote letters for us, they helped us develop professionally. We get that. We understand how important that is. And we are really happy to do that. You deserve that mentoring. Ask for it. You'd be surprised how many students, don't extend themselves to take advantage of that. And we're happy to provide it. So feel that it's your right to be mentored in that way, because it is. And it's okay to try to start that process of building those relationships, and they will take off and be really useful for you. And we're prepared and ready to do that. You'll be surprised at how many students don't do that though. So the students who do make an effort, we notice that. And that's actually a very important indication to us about how much you like the field, what how dedicated you are in this as a future path. So take advantage of that. We'll be happy to help. There's also a question in the chat about tenured versus non-tenured. It doesn't matter for letter writers. As if you need a faculty member is a faculty member from that standpoint.
Great, thank you, professors. I'm kind of looking through some of these chats, some of the chat to see if there's any other questions. But one question did come to my mind, if I may. Let's say, for instance, we're applying to a particular graduate school program. I'll use my discipline, for example, and it's history, but perhaps I've developed a relationship with somebody in a different discipline, like ethnic studies or sociology or something. Is it okay to ask the professor, or how does that look from the grad school perspective that we're applying to, that the professor perhaps isn't, from the discipline being applied to?
I think you maybe want to, if you're being requested for, if you're only being asked for 1 letter, then you want it to come from that discipline. If you're being asked for something like 3 letters, then 2 of the 3 can be discipline specific. And the third one, I mean, a lot of the STEM students that I write for is because they took public speaking with me. So I'm a theater professor writing a letter of rec to med school all of the time. But of course, this is a program that has required and values communication and presentation. So that is the facet of that person that I'm speaking to. And maybe their chemistry professor is talking about their sciencey minded self, but we're now writing 2 letters that show their strengths in different ways. So I think it's great if you've connected with a professor in ethnic studies and you're a history major or something, to show sort of this holistic version of yourself and to have diverse faculty doing that for you.
Great, thank you for that, Professor.
There's another question in the chat by Alec. He asks, I do research under one professor who I think will get a solid recommendation from, but besides him, I'm not connected to other professors. Should I look for letters of rec from professors I take classes from, or should I find other research positions so I can get to know another professor?
It is probably, well, when I'm looking at letters, if there's one letter from a research advisor that is very detailed and indicates, strong ability in the field, real accomplishment through several years of research, that looks great. So don't go changing research groups just to have another letter writer. If you have one spectacular letter and then 2 letters that are, good student, offers some insight, but can't be nearly as detailed as your advisor, that's okay. That's not unusual. Is it better if they can all say great things about you in wonderful detail? Sure. But the reality is probably more like you describe, Alec. You're going to have one faculty member who knows you incredibly well, and then 2 who sort of know you. Yeah, not unusual. But don't go change research labs just for that. There might be other reasons to change your research lab, but that's not one of them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I sit on the Mellon Maze and we read a lot of letters, and usually the students that advisor or primary person writes a longer, more detailed letter. And it's great when the other letters can echo sort of similar things about you, that shows, that show your strength, but it's very typical to have sort of one letter be stronger or longer than the rest. But yeah, so that's the way it should be, but that's okay.
Great. Thank you, professors. Lauren asks in the chat, is it wrong to ask the professor to see the letter of recommendation before it's submitted to the program that the student is applying to? So let's say, for instance, a student has waived the right to see the letter, right? That's a formality that's done between, to the college that they're applying to. But the student still wants to see the letter. Maybe they're a little concerned. Is it taboo? Does it look bad? Is it, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, unfortunately, it probably does look bad. It wouldn't be something that would strike me in a positive way. So if you have concerns, I would just not use that person as a letter writer. But it would, I would get all sorts of red flags being thrown up by that. And that actually might influence the letter that I would write in the future about that. So I would avoid that and have faith that the person's going to write you a good letter if they agree to it. It breaks decorum, and that's it. And that is, that's a bad sign.
Thank you, Professor. And that was an important question to ask, and I'm glad that we had a nice response to that. Richard asks, as a 4th year that has not participated in research, would you advise that I get involved in multiple labs in my last year, or should I just dedicate myself to one lab and get one really good letter?
Can I back up on the last one just really quick? On the other hand, it's totally okay for you to say, hey, Professor Mueller, do you think you could write me a strong letter? Do you think you have enough information to write me a good letter? That's totally fine. I get asked that all the time, but don't ask me to see the letter if you've signed off on not seeing the letter for the application. So very distinct things.
Len, I feel like you should answer. I'm not a science person, so I
Yeah.
don't want to give bad advice about research labs.
I think it looks better to dedicate yourself to one lab and to actually accomplish something. Although it happens that you might start in one lab and decide this isn't what you want to do, and that is perfectly fine to go find another lab. We see this all the time. But if you're enjoying it, it's better to stay in one lab and actually get some nice results, potentially even publish a paper, right? Or just have a significant result or learn the techniques in greater detail. We all know that 1 year of undergraduate research is not going to make you an expert in an area. It takes 5 years of graduate research to hopefully get to that level. So the longer you stay, you will be learning sort of exponentially more as the time goes on. So it'd be a shame to sort of truncate that prematurely. in my humble opinion. Others might disagree though.
I think we have time for just one more question. I think that's actually a good question too. So Catherine asks, would it be better to ask a letter from a professor who knows us little but have tenure, or a professor who knows us well without tenure? I asked, so she said that she asked before and was told that she should ask professors with tenure. So I was just wondering what you guys have to say on that.
Faculty is faculty. Maybe junior faculty, are spread, spread thin, but so are tenured faculty. So I just think go with the person that knows you, can speak to you the most, right? That's at the end of the day, we're sitting in a room trying to read. The people who are reading these files are trying to get to know you from these pieces of paper, right? They're less interested if the letter writer has tenure or no, right? That's what the people on the other side who received these letters are reading it for, right? So that's, I've literally never looked up, oh, is this faculty member tenure who wrote this letter or not? I just said, oh, what a great, lovely letter, and that's what we, what we're looking for. So that's what I would stress, is go with people that know you. I know there's this idea that if the letter writer, has a Pulitzer and a MacArthur and whatever, all these things, it's going to be more impressive, but it might not, because that person might not know you, or they might, but that's not, it's going to be what's in the content of the letter, not just the flashy name. So that's going to describe you to the thing, because you're applying, not them, to whatever thing that you're going for.
Yeah, just echoing, the person that knows you best is the person to go with. And having been on the side of reviewing things, it is a colossal amount of information. So Alejandra's right. I'm not like Googling the side people that wrote, it's like, it's already enough to read all of these essays and CVs and letters. And it's an obscene amount of information from the reviewer's standpoint. So what you want is for the letter to be strong. Find the people that make the letter strong.
I wanted to ask the panel, sometimes I've been asked by students who are in these classes where it's 200-300 students, and they're working really closely with the TA, and the TA has gotten to know them. And they'll ask, can the TA write the letter? And for grad school, we don't want a TA, we want the faculty. And sometimes the advice I've given students is, if the TA knows you really well, talk to the TA and talk to the faculty and say, could they work together on writing that letter of recommendation? Or sometimes the TA can draft out the letter and give it to the faculty, and the faculty will sign off on it. So that's one advice, but I wanted to ask the panelists what their thoughts were on that.
Yeah, I'm always mindful of the TA's time. This is a form of labor and it's time consuming. So I try to be careful. Like, I would never ask that of the TA, but if the student and the TA have, a close relationship, and the student has asked that or has emailed the TA and CC'd me on it or something, sure, I'm delighted for the TA to draft the letter, and I'm more than happy to sign it if they're working with the student more often than I am. I just would never feel comfortable being the person making that ask, but the student might, which is okay.
Yeah, sometimes you can just ask the TA to send a quick email, highlighting your strengths to the faculty member who's drafting the letter. And I have, upon occasion, then incorporated that into letters of recommendation. Probably only a handful of times that the TAs have been involved, but it's quite useful, and we can reference that in the letter of recommendation.
Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for your time. I think this was a great conversation, and I want to be respectful of your time. So I hope that the students have enjoyed this, and we have recorded this session, so we will send it to all of our attendees. Thank you again to our faculty. You guys are fabulous, and I really appreciate your time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, thank you.
Thanks, good luck.
Thank you all